There are drawings, there are poems, there's film, but in a lot of ways they work around each other in terms of the time that I have and what I can do with them. The drawings and the poems, very often the drawings happen in the night and it's a kind of a meditation. You hear the sound of the pen on paper and it's almost like a release after working with words all day. So in a way one enriches the other in a lot of ways, and I never know whether when I put a pen to paper it's going to become a drawing or a poem. With the film it's a very different thing because the film is directed, the film is driven by a message. I work with non-government organizations, with children, health, education, shelter, reproductive health for the mother. So those things are very much about the message, and in that I'm restricted just by the need of the film that I'm making. So that's very different from the poems and the drawings where I have complete freedom. I went away to India when I was very young, and I think that was something that galvanized me to write, because India is a place that unsettles you, it sends you off balance, and I think that's actually a very good thing for a writer or an artist to be, not to be too comfortable, to be hanging on by the skin of your teeth, to be uncomfortable enough and to be thrown into a kind of chaos that makes writing possible, and not just possible but necessary. After my late husband, after Simon died, for a while I couldn't write at all. I was absolutely numb with grief, and then when I began to write it was really like a kind of a scream. They were poems of grief but they were too raw and I never could have published those. But then I realized that what I was writing was not death, I was writing life. And I was writing about this man's great energy and humor, his wit. I've never laughed so much in my life as I did in the 7 years I had with Simon. So somehow that found its way into the poems. And if they made me laugh, that was good enough for me, because that was Simon. The whole subject of the haunting was so exciting for me because, to begin with, I love ghost stories. So the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to write a kind of a ghost story. So there is that strand in the series of poems that I've written. And the story is of a girl who has drowned in a stepped well, which is, I began it with the idea of a stepped well in Delhi, which I've heard about. A friend told me about this Agra Sendi Bauli, and she said when they went in, it was as if you could feel the ghosts of all the people who had drowned there. So I began with that one thought. Then the moment you have the girl, I began to think about the social situation around it and what it was that might have caused that death. And then began to look at all the kinds of restrictions around her. Her desires, her young, sensuous, open wish, her mind within this constricting society of people talking behind the back. So I actually say in the poem, no wrong was done, but the wrong that is done is what happens in the society. And that brings me back to the Edith Wharton short story, The Pomegranate Seed, which was also to do with the restrictions of society and the question of communication, and then the wonderful, exciting thing of the written word. What is all this about? I come down to it at some point in the haunting. It's a haunting of words. It is, what are we worth? What are our words worth unless they haunt you? So for me, it all became tied up, of course, with the Persephone myth, the pomegranate seed, the whole idea of the pomegranate as a mythical symbol. All of that became tied up in this idea of the haunting. So I was very excited with what it unfolded once I began. By the end of this sequence in the haunting is the poet who is haunted and is saying stay. Because you're also haunted by the poems themselves, by the writing of the poems, and wanting to stay with that idea not wanting to let it go. It's also being haunted by the girl and the idea of all the lost girls. So all of those wishes, all of those hauntings come together in that last word, stay. I wanted the feeling of this girl's absolute desire, this adolescent desire and longing, which, you know, we've all done it, where every eyelash, every flicker is watched, and you savor every movement of the other person. So that longing is kind of intensified into the fact that nothing happened, and is concentrated by that in a way, and by the fact that she comes back then, and that whole terrible idea of the sensuous idea of admiring the boys, admiring that delicious dip between haunch and hip. She loves it, and that sensuousness also comes through in the longing later, in the coming back, the returning to his bed. 6 pomegranate seeds. They burst on my tongue, those seeds, when I ate them one by one. The taste of the world I remembered, the colour of gardens, juice overflowing before I threw away the sun. 6 rings. The phone rings 6 times. You rarely answer the landline, but tonight you pick up. Silence. Crackling. Then my thin voice speaks from a drowning world. Others tune in, taking advantage of the opening, crying, wailing against the wall of white sound, sending messages for the people they still love, the ones they left behind. Tell my husband where to find the thing I hid, in the cupboard, top left shelf. Tell my daughter to be kind. Tell my mother I didn't mean it. Tell my lover I didn't really mind. You hear something, but far, like a ghost with no throat, like a shadow of words under water. You never spoke to me, but did you see? I wanted to tell you something, but something tied my tongue. This is me calling. Fix. It was loaded against me, the thing with the seeds. They were there just inside the skin, asking to be eaten. 6 pomegranate seeds. 6 months in the light. 6 having sex in the dark with a God I don't want. I can't wait to get out to the shops, the hot bazaar, the baskets of peaches. I never know if my voice reaches you, but I imagine you stopping to look at your phone, checking missed calls, caller unknown. Then you go on out of a station, crossing a road, my voice drowned in the sound of car horns and the light of all those unfixed living things exploding